One of the craziest and most amazing hairstyles in the world comes from the Africans, the black people. Their braiding styles are so mesmerizing to look at and just as hard to make. But there is a very dark history behind the origin of these hairstyles. Most people think that Africans came up with these braiding styles as fashion. Some people think that this braiding is part of their culture and ancestry. Although these two factors are somewhat true, this is not the whole truth. In reality, these braiding styles were influenced by their history as slaves. But first, please subscribe to our channel and hit like. It helps us get you new content. When the British people invaded African lands and took people as their slaves, blacks revolted against this oppression and found their way to freedom with these hairstyles. But how? Black slaves had a hard life when they were ruled by the British people. Something as small as speaking a single word could cost them their life. So, these slaved Africans had to be creative about how they communicated with each other without speaking a single word. And the solution that they came up with was styling their hair in such a way that it would look like maps. For instance, one of the most popular black hairstyles in cornrows. And if you look at the style, you will see that the pattern can easily be noticed as a map. And this was IT. Born out of necessity, hairstyling became the language of black slaves. With their cornrows, they could speak without getting noticed by the British masters. In fact, you should know that the cornrows alone are the hairstyle that carried most of the messages. For instance, the pattern of cornrows mimicked the landscapes of plantations and roads to freedom. Some braids indicated the safest paths to travel, others pointed out nearby water sources. So in a way, for those who could read them, braids were a map to freedom. But who came up with these, and how did these hairstyle maps help black slaves? Is there any name to attach with this history? It all started with Harriet Tubman. She was the conductor of the Underground Railroad. Known for her bravery and ingenuity, she was the person who rescued black slaves and set them free. And to communicate with black slaves, she used braiding hairstyles. Tubman often used these braided maps in her missions to rescue enslaved people. She was both a conductor and a map reader, guiding many to safety. Throughout her life, she rescued countless people to safety. You can say that black braiding styles are a part of her great legacy.
Harriet, welcome to the Underground Railroad.
Ready? After all, it was Tubman who not only followed these braided maps, but also encouraged others to use them. She knew that every twist and turn in a braid could mean the difference between freedom and captivity. Even after her death, black people kept mapping their freedom in their braids. Although this part of their history is mostly lost to them, there is no denying the significance of these styles and how majestic they look. Another thing you should know about these black braided hairstyles is that they show a sense of community. Strength is in numbers. And for blacks, the only way to show a united spirit was to adopt braiding. Although most of the black slaves were shorn like sheep by their masters, others always gave them a fight. They came up with braiding to show that they could take care of their hair and that it would not be the master's problem. You should also know that these braiding styles are called cornrows because that's where the slaves would meet and start their day's work. They would get together and plot their escape by mapping rows and rows of corn and cotton fields in their braids. So, not only did these braids bind them together into a community, but it also gave them directions. You can think of this braiding as a passcode to their secret community that was fighting for freedom. If you wanted to know who you could trust as a black slave, you only had to see their head for braids. If the other slave had braids, then that would be a trusted person from the freedom-fighting community. When the word spread that braids represent unity and freedom, more and more black slaves started braiding their hair. Women and children would gather in small groups. They would braid each other's hair, sharing stories and secrets. It was in these intimate moments that plans for escape were often made. So, you see, braiding was not only grooming back in the city, in fact, it was an act of resistance. Another amazing thing about braids is that the black slaves used to hide their letters in them. Although not many of the black slaves could read or write, those who could took full advantage of it. They would write letters for other slave communities and hide them in their braiding. Whenever the opportunity came, they would take out the letter from their braids and pass it on to the members of the other slave communities. And this was a smart decision. After all, the masters only checked their slaves physically, but they never unbraided their hair to see if there was something hidden in them. Throughout history, there are accounts of people hiding letters in their hair. But you should know that most of these people were black, and perhaps this simple tactic was their own creation as well. And if any master ever tried to unbraid their black slaves, the slaves would say they have lice. Disgusted, the masters would not stand them unbraiding their hair and spread the lice to others. This way, they turned the simple act of hairstyling into a powerful tool for resistance. Even though not many people are aware of the importance of braiding in Black history, it is an important part of Black freedom struggle. Who knows, without mapping fields in their hair, the Blacks might never be free. If the Blacks had not created maps through braiding hair, they might still be slaves to British oppressors. If the Blacks had not hidden letters in their braids, there might never be a word of freedom passed between Black communities that were living in hunger and pain under British oppression. So, the Black people need to acknowledge this part of their ancestors' legacy. Braiding is not simply an act of grooming or styling, it is rebelling for one's own freedom. Braiding is a promise of sticking together as a community, but with each passing day, Black people are forgetting this legacy and losing their sense of identity. Most of the Black haircuts today have nothing to do with braids. In fact, today, Black haircuts are mostly shorn looks that make you look chic and rap without any give. And the worst part is that the British and American whites have taken a liking to braids. And although their liking seems harmless, they're causing disrespect to the Black culture. They're braiding their hair in ridiculous ways so that it looks bad for the Black people. This can be a trick on their part. The whites are turning Black braids into a fashion statement, and a very poor one at that. And you should know that this comes under cultural appropriation. It means that the whites have no respect for Black people's culture, and just like their ancestors, they're stealing a part of Blacks for their own benefits and gains. Now, it is on Black people to recognize this cultural appropriation and take ownership of their legacy again. Sure, the whites have the right to braiding as well, but they need to show respect to Black culture before they even think about braiding. The greatest link to ancestors that the Blacks have is their braiding. But now that the majority of the Blacks only see it as fashion, the link is weaker than ever. Blacks are again losing their sense of identity and culture under white rules. But this time, the battlegrounds are fashion runways and magazines. Braids have no place in today's fashion world because the whites are the dictators of this world. So again, Black people are being oppressed. Sure, there are whites who promote braiding, but they do it as temporary fashion. For example, whenever the Black History Month is near, the braiding takes up the magazine and internet pages. But the rest of the year, it is close-cropped hairstyles for bangs and other looks. And both female and male fashion magazines are doing this. Although braiding is a gender-neutral style, the male magazines dismiss it as female fashion and the female magazines dismiss it as male fashion. As a result, the Blacks are getting brainwashed by whites that braiding, their Black identity, has no place in their world, even one so limited as that of fashion. Braiding is the most important part of Black history. It shows us how a sense of identity can save you from oppression by helping you find your voice. Braiding is a story of survival against all odds. If the Blacks hope to stay strong as a community, they need to adapt to braiding and teach their children the importance of sticking to their ancestors' way of styling their hair. They need to demand a place for their own identity in the fashion world as well. No kind of oppression should be tolerated. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments below and share this video with friends and family as well.